Welcome back. I want to talk briefly about another framework that we'll be using in this course. That is the Synergistic portfolio framework. With this framework, you are essentially categorizing two business units based on the types of synergies that exist between them. So if you take one of those business units as your focal business, you can think about the relationship of any other business to that focal business unit. This is a portfolio, so a company may have many different business units that are all working together to create some sort of value. There are two axes in this framework. There are benefits, net benefits or net costs from belonging to the portfolio. So if a particular product is incurring a cost by virtue of being in that portfolio, they would be on the left side of this axis. If they receive a benefit from being in the portfolio, they would be on the right side. Similarly, there are also benefits to the rest of the portfolio or costs to the rest of the portfolio. So if the presence of a business unit creates extra value for the other business units within the portfolio, that would be in the top half of this framework. If there's a cost incurred on the rest of the portfolio, then that would be the bottom part of this framework. So once you combine these elements, you have fits, which are in the upper right quadrant of this framework. Fits have both benefits to the business from being in the portfolio and benefits to the rest of the portfolio based on the existence of that business. So these would be examples of business units with symmetric synergies between them. In addition to that, you have the top left and bottom right quadrants. In this case, you have either a benefit to the business unit with a cost to the rest of the portfolio, or a benefit to the rest of the portfolio to the detriment of the focal business unit. Within this, there's this dividing line depending on whether the net benefit to one exceeds the net cost to the other. If there's a net benefit for the business being in the portfolio, the benefit to that business exceeds the cost to the rest of the portfolio, then that business unit would be a taker. At the other side, if there's benefit to the rest of the portfolio and it exceeds the cost to a particular business unit, then that business is a giver within the portfolio. If the benefits do not exceed the cost, then you would have altruists or parasites. And in the final quadrant, you have misfits, where the presence of a business unit imposes a cost on the rest of the portfolio, as well as the performance of that business unit being worse by virtue of being in the portfolio. So we'll talk about some examples of that in this class. One place you might see that is if two business units are part of the same firm, but by virtue of being in the same firm, they may be able to sell to a smaller customer base. So sometimes a customer might be interested in buying something from one of the business units, but if that customer competes against the other business unit, they may not be interested in supporting a company that they perceive as a competitor. So that would be an example of a business unit incurring a cost by virtue of being part of the portfolio if they're losing customers based on other businesses within the portfolio. With this threshold of acceptance, which determines or categorizes the synergy based on whether the net benefit exceeds the net cost, there's also room for increasing or decreasing that threshold, and that often comes down to the risks of errors of omission versus commission. You can think of an error of omission as missing out on a big opportunity. So maybe there's some new technology coming along, and the core of the firm is worried that they might be disrupted and displaced if that new technology becomes dominant. They may be interested in creating a new business unit or acquiring a business unit that specializes in that other technology. Perhaps the combination is creating somewhat less value than they might create on their own. But if that avoids a large risk to the firm, it might still be worth making that investment just to avoid complete disruption down the road. At the other extreme, you can have errors of commission. That's when you expect some net benefit through the combination of business units, but there may be high risks in order to try to create that benefit. You might see that very commonly with mergers and acquisitions. So often those can fail. There may be challenges that were not foreseen at the time the decision was made to merge. So by having an acquisition and trying to create that value, you may actually end up destroying more value than those synergies create between the business units. Because of that, you want to have a higher threshold for acceptance. You want some pretty high certainty that you will get a lot of value from the synergies in order to justify taking the risks of doing that merger or acquisition. And that's it for the Synergistic Portfolio Framework. Again, this is a framework that we'll be repeatedly revisiting in the future.